and welcome to the International Daily Roundup with People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from across the globe. Let's take a look at today's headlines. Cracks begin to show in Sudan's transitional government over military control of the economy. Rights groups, opposition parties in the UK oppose Overseas Operations Bill, claiming it provides amnesty to war crimes. Argentine government declares cell phones, internet and pay television as essential services. Yemen's Southern Transitional Council pulls out of Riyadh agreement, blames Hadi government of irresponsible behavior. An update on the COVID-19 pandemic. Cracks within Sudan's transitional government have begun to appear after increasing tensions between civilian Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok and the military President General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The tensions are increasing over the issue of the army's continuing control over most of the economy. The Prime Minister has been under increasing pressure as the protests in the capital Khartoum and other cities since last week are gaining momentum. The protests are being held around the demands for establishment of the Legislative Council and the civilian takeover of the parallel economy controlled by the Sudan Armed Forces or the SAF. SAF is composed of the Army Intelligence Services and its affiliated militia called the Rapid Support Forces or the RSF. Abdullah Hamdok finally demanded on August 21st that the proceeds from the army-run businesses be transferred to the Ministry of Finance. He complained that his cabinet controls just 18% of the economy while the remaining is under the control of the SAF. This, he said, is hampering the ability of the government to reform and revive the economy. Inflation in the country hit 143% last month. 221 of the 421 state-owned companies in Sudan are reportedly owned and controlled directly by the army. No taxes are paid by any of these companies and the profits are not remitted to the public treasury. Investments of these companies include in the sector of agriculture, livestock, private healthcare, pharmaceuticals, mining, tourism, etc. Speaking to high-ranking officers at the army command in Khartoum the same day, al-Burhan accused that the failure of the civilian government was being attributed to the military. In a press statement, he is also reported to have blamed some circles of making sedition between the armed forces and the Sudanese people by attributing the finance ministry's economic failure to the companies and the investments of the armed forces. The coordinating body of the resistance committees in Khartoum province responded by stating that they consider al-Burhan's recent statements a direct threat to the revolution. Organized in neighborhoods across the country, these resistance committees form the nerve center coordinating the protest movement. Human rights groups in Britain came out in opposition to a proposed bill in the United Kingdom's parliament which they allege provides amnesty to the armed forces involved in serious violations of human rights during overseas deployments. The controversial Overseas Operations Bill will be presented in the UK's parliament next month by the Conservative Party government. Concerns are being raised against the bill's provisions to restrict prosecution of torture and war crimes against the British soldiers deployed in foreign countries including Iraq and Afghanistan. The Labour Party MP and Shadow Defence Minister John Healey has written a letter to the Defence Minister Ben Wallace asking him to halt the introduction of the bill. Healey argues that the proposed bill undermines international laws including Geneva Convention and UN human rights regimes. The bill has been prepared to fulfill one of the election promises of the ruling Conservative Party and had promised to save the armed forces from vexatious legal claims. The proposed bill will provide partial amnesty to British soldiers alleged to be involved in kidnapping, torture, killings and other kind of harassments of the civilians if the investigation against them is not completed in 5 years. Large number of cases have been filed by local Iraqis against the British forces deployed in the country since the 2003 US-led invasion. According to a report published in the Middle East Eye, the cases against the British soldiers serving in Iraq have skyrocketed post-2017. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez announced earlier this month that cell phone, internet and pay television services will be considered essential public services. He also anticipated that the rates of these services will be frozen until December 31st. In the face of the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, no one should give up a part of their income to face the increases in the price of these services, said Fernandez. In a tweet, Fernandez announced that education, access to knowledge, culture and communication are basic rights that we must preserve. That is why we have ordered that from now on there are inclusive plans for basic, universal and compulsory benefits for those who have the least. The president also stated that with the measure, the state recovers regulatory tools that the previous government removed from the state. The measure will be applicable to all service providers. It responds to a historical request from consumer defense entities which have repeatedly demanded until recently an end to the increase in the prices of these services. With the emergency need decree that will be signed in the coming days, the measure will be implemented nationwide and will benefit nearly 30 million users throughout the country who between December 2019 and this month have suffered an increase of about 20% and paid more for these services. On August 27, Wednesday, the separatist Southern Transitional Council or the STC in Yemen announced its decision to withdraw from the power sharing and peace talks with the government of President Mansour Hadi. Hadi's government is supported by Saudi Arabia and is internationally recognized. The STC claimed that pulling out of the talks is based on the irresponsible behavior by parties with respect to the Riyadh agreement, which is a power sharing deal between the two Yemeni factions. Soon after the announcement, fighting broke out between the government and the STC forces in southern Yemen. The STC is currently supported by the United Arab Emirates, former partner in the Saudi-led military coalition in Yemen, which backs Hadi. In a statement to reporters, STC acknowledged that it had sent a letter to the Saudi authorities confirming the suspension of its participation in the ongoing consultations to implement the agreement. It cited several reasons for its decision to exit the deal, including the steady decline of public services in southern Yemen, as well as the recent military escalations by government forces in the Abiyan province. Wednesday's developments were a significant blow to Saudi hopes of uniting the Hadi government and the STC in order to fight the rebel Shia Houthis who oppose the Hadi regime. The STC had declared self-rule in much of southern Yemen in April this year, including in Aden, where it managed to expel the Hadi government from its temporary base. The fighting between the two sides threatens to plunge Yemen into a deeper crisis. The war between the Houthis and the Yemeni government, which started in 2014 along with the military intervention by the Saudi-led coalition in March 2015, has already killed more than 112,000 Yemenis. Most of them are civilians. Now for today's COVID-19 update, the total number of cases reported globally crossed 24.2 million, with the total deaths crossing 827,000. With 77,000 new cases reported in a single day, India saw the biggest ever daily spike. This brings India's new tally to 3.3 million and a death toll of 61,529. With the first set of cases being reported in the enclave, Gaza declared lockdown on Tuesday. With a fragile healthcare system and continuing Israeli aggression, the Gaza Strip had restricted travel outside the enclave during the beginning of the pandemic. 110 cases and 1 death has been reported so far in Gaza's quarantine facilities. Earlier this month, Israel had blockaded fuel imports into Gaza, cutting off fuel deliveries to the region's sole power plant. The International Committee of the Red Cross had issued warnings about the resulting power shortages and the adverse impact it could have on Gaza's health sector. Since 2007, Gaza has been reeling under Israeli blockades of essential goods such as medicines, fuel, and groceries. This is expected to amplify the impact of the pandemic in the region. And this is all we have for this episode of the International Daily Roundup. For more such stories and videos, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for watching.